Well, today we're talking about the stress effects on the brain, body, and diabetes. So how many of you have been stressed before? How many of you stressed over this project? Yeah, okay. Well, let me tell you how that affects you. So, there are many symptoms of stress, including headaches or irritability, muscle pain or tension, sleeping and eating too much or too little, feeling ill, fatigue, or unmotivated, depression or anxiety, withdrawal from friends and family, restlessness, or acting out in anger are all very common symptoms. Now, these have many effects on the brain. So, when you're under stress, your amygdala, which is the part of your brain that controls emotional processing, sends a distress signal to your hypothalamus. This is what gives us the fight, flight, or freeze instinct. With that signal, a dose of the hormone cortisol is released. Cortisol in itself is not bad, but when your brain is introduced to a lot of stress at one time, your brain may produce more cortisol than it's able to release and balance in the body after a stress event. Cortisol helps regulate blood sugar levels in cells and has a utilitarian value in the hippocampus, where memories are stored and processed. However, if the brain and body are introduced to high levels of cortisol, it can disrupt synapses regulation. This causes your nerves not to be able to communicate with each other and leads to a lack of sociability with others. Stress can kill brain cells, and it shrinks the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for memory and learning. This is why many students are sometimes worse at memory tests and remembering what they have learned in previous lessons. This is when we are experiencing acute stress. For those of you that don't know, there are actually two types of stresses. There is acute stress, which is labeled as short-term stress. It means that the symptoms come on fast, but they don't stay very long. The sudden onset of acute stress immediately affects the ability to recall facts. This can happen when you're taking a test or you have test anxiety or math anxiety. The second stress is chronic stress. This is when your body and brain are continually put through stress every day. This could be emotional stress, environmental stress, relationship stress, and work stress. This is the kind of stress that damages the hippocampus and keeps it from being able to form memories. While the prefrontal cortex shrinks, the amygdala grows and becomes more receptive to stress, and this becomes the vicious cycle that we call the stress-brain loop. The effects of stress depend on the type of stress you are experiencing, so it is vital to identify what type of stress it is before taking steps to alleviate it. So this is the prefrontal cortex. The hypothalamus is right here, and the hippocampus is right there with the amygdala right next to it. So, just as the brain is affected, so is the body. Each one of your systems is affected. So with the musculoskeletal system, your muscles begin to tighten and pain will occur, especially in the back, neck, and shoulders. With your respiratory system, the stress will cause shortness of breath or rapid breathing. This can cause issues for those who already have existing respiratory diseases such as asthma and COPD, which is chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. This comes from smoking. People with an already existing cardiovascular disease can even find acute stress deadly because even something small can cause stronger heart contractions and can even cause heart diseases that weren't there before. With the gastrointestinal system, it holds millions of neurons that are in constant communication with the brain. Stress can cause this communication to be severed. And the bacteria that lives in our guts to influence our health can drastically change, which changes our mood. Repeated stress can even cause the linings of our stomach to thin over time. However, stress does not increase the acid in our stomachs or cause stomach ulcers like we are usually led to believe. Those are caused by bacterial infection. With the nervous system, the cortisol leads to causing too much adrenaline in your body, and it can't be released as much as it usually is, and the body thinks it's in danger all the time. With the reproductive system, this can cause fertility problems, erectile dysfunction, or dysmenorrhea. And the final system I will talk about is the endocrine system. During a stressful time, the hypothalamus, which connects the brain to the immune system, signals the pituitary gland to produce hormones that signal the adrenal glands and increase cortisol. The endocrine system is where the pancreas is housed. This is why stress has such a big part in affecting diabetes. Stress can cause pain, bloating, nausea, and other stomach discomforts, making more easily felt. Even vomiting is a symptom if the stress is severe enough. Chronic stress, or constant stress, experienced over a long period of time, can contribute to short-term problems for heart and blood vessels. The consistent and ongoing increase in heart rate and elevated levels of the stress hormone and blood pressure can take a toll on the body. This long-term, ongoing stress can increase the risk for hypertension, heart attack, or stroke. In the same sense, stress can also cause you to have a common cold because the bacteria in your stomach, and can also cause loss of appetite. The cortisol produced is essential and affects your body as well as the brain. Cortisol also stifles insulin productions and narrows arteries. Once the threat passes, cortisol levels typically return to normal and your body recovers from its effects. But when the stress is chronic, cortisol levels stay elevated. And in the long term, this can contribute to a host of problems, including type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and chronic gastrointestinal issues such as irritable bowel syndrome. These are just a few of the many issues that can occur when introduced and constantly introduced to stress. Now, how it all connects to diabetes. So before we know how it affects diabetes, we have to know what it is and the difference between the two types. So, type 1 is an autoimmune disease of childhood that causes destruction of cells in the pancreas that produces insulin, and it's incurable. Type 2, which is the most common type, is mainly diet-related and develops over time and is reversible though not curable. As of 2019, 37.3 million Americans, or 11.3% of the population, have diabetes. Nearly 1.9 million Americans have type 1 diabetes, which is about 2% of the whole population, including about 244,000 children and adolescents. Of the 37.3 million adults with diabetes, 28.7 million were diagnosed and 8.5 million were undiagnosed. Diabetes is the 7th leading cause of death in the United States in 2019, based on 87,000 death certificates or more, which diabetes was listed as the underlying cause of death. This is mostly due to seizures when you have a low blood sugar, and second would be the diabetic coma when you have a high blood sugar. Diabetes is also the second most expensive disease known and is more expensive than everything that comes with cancer. And that averages about $16,752 a year for only one person, and that can range for one person up to $200,000. And in my family, we have 3, so we're just extra lucky. With disease comes expenses, and which is why I brought this. This whole basket, which I'm going to have people pass around, this only lasts me for a couple of days. So feel free to look through that. Please don't drink the juices. I need those. Those are important. But that basket only lasts me for about a couple of days, and I need about 3 times that for just a week-long trip. With things like sites, syringes, insulin, CGMs, which are continuous glucose monitors, insulin pumps, and so many other supplies, you can begin to see why it becomes so expensive. Which is why also we are so stressed, because we have to make sure there are so many complications that come with diabetes. We have to make sure we take care of it, we don't die from it, and that we can actually pay for it. But there are also mental and physical sides to diabetes. So this is how it all connects. There's what's called the head in a bucket syndrome, and it just means it's so much work to keep up with diabetes and everything that it entails that many people who've had it for several years begin to lose their motivation to care for themselves. They, in a sense, put their head in a sort of bucket so they can escape all the stress of taking care of it. What happens is they try to forget that they have it. And I actually have personal experience with this. I've had it for almost 16 years now. And I can tell you that it is not only physically draining, it is mentally draining as well. This is why diabetics try so hard to forget about it. And because the stress we feel is so overwhelming, Not to mention the stress that we can cause the thing that we stress about. So it just becomes a vicious cycle of not taking care of it. Our diabetes gets worse, we stress about it more, and it just continues. So, oh, that's not right. The physical side of things comes with our cortisol levels. The cortisol levels make the blood sugars very unpredictable. Your body may not be able to process the glucagon released by your firing nerve cells if you have diabetes. If you can't convert the glucose into energy, it builds up in the bloodstream. This causes your blood glucose levels to rise. Diabetes management is a lifelong process. This can add stress to your daily life, which becomes chronic stress. Stress can be a major barrier to effective glucose control. Stress hormones in your body may directly affect glucose levels. During your fight or flight response, your body releases adrenaline and cortisol into your bloodstream and your respiratory rates increase. Your body directs blood to the muscles and limbs, allowing you to fight the situation. Stress can also affect your blood glucose numbers in other ways. It can make it harder to focus on your diabetes care. You may eat too much or not enough, avoid exercise, or forget to take your medicines. Sometimes, no matter how hard you try, your blood glucose levels do not stay in your target range. In addition to stress, you may have variations in insulin absorption or changes in the amounts of food or levels of physical activity from day to day. When you're stressed, the body prepares itself by ensuring that enough sugar or energy is readily available. Insulin levels fall, glucagon and epinephrine levels rise, and more glucose is released from the liver. At the same time, growth hormones and cortisol levels rise, which causes the body tissues to be less sensitive to insulin. As a result, more glucose is available in the bloodstream. When you have type 1 diabetes, insulin reactions or low blood sugars are a common cause of stress. The hormonal response to a low blood sugar includes a rapid release of epinephrine, followed by a slower release of cortisol and growth hormone. These hormonal responses to the low blood sugar may last from 6 to 8 hours. During that time, the blood sugar may be difficult to control, and the phenomenon of a low blood sugar followed by high blood sugar is called a rebound or Somogyi reaction. When you have type 1 diabetes, stress may make your blood sugar go up and become more difficult to control, and you may need higher doses of insulin. So, what should Christians think about this topic? Well, Christians are told 365 times in the Bible to fear God. That's one per day, every day of the year. In Matthew chapter 6, verses 25 through 34, Jesus tells us not to worry because the flowers and the birds are taken care of, and we have more importance than them. Stress is detrimental in so many ways, not only physically but mentally as well. If you have an existing disease already, it can amplify the symptoms or make it unbearable. There is no true way to prevent stress, but there are steps that we can take to make it lighter on ourselves so the damage isn't so severe. Take steps to keep yourself calm, pray and ask for guidance, and remember that you shouldn't worry about tomorrow because today has enough trouble on its own. In Psalm 34, 4 through 5, it says, "I sought the Lord and he answered me and delivered me from all my fears. Those who look on him are radiant, and their faces shall never be ashamed." In this passage, it explains that when you lean on the Lord and you search for him, he will give you peace and you will never have to be ashamed. A lot of people are so ashamed of so many things, and they don't understand how God's opinion is the only thing that truly matters. Stress is so harmful to the brain and body that it's not worth it to worry about trivial things. But instead, we should lean on the Lord because if we call out to him, he will deliver us from our fears and our stress. Our peace is so much greater if it comes from our loving Father in heaven. In 2 Timothy 1:7, it says, "For God will never give you the spirit of fear, but the Holy Spirit who gives you mighty power, love, and self-control." God doesn't always take away our stress immediately. He gives us the opportunity to lean on him and trust him fully. So, my brothers and sisters, lean on him when you feel like the stress is too much to bear. God gave you a beautiful body and inner working system. Let's try our best to take care of it.
Good job, Emma. We have several guests. I want to open up to you first. If you got any questions or feedback for Emma, feel free to offer that.
I have some questions. You said there are 3 in your family. What do genetics play into it?
It's not exactly a genetic disease. Autoimmune diseases There's a little bit of genetics. The autoimmune part of it runs in the families, but it's not necessarily genetic. The autoimmune disease is something that your body thinks that your pancreas, like for diabetes, your pancreas is dangerous, so it goes in and kills it. So that can run through families. So my dad and my sister both have it. I was diagnosed when I was 3, my sister was 9, and my dad was 30.
One thing that you said for chronic stress, part of the definition that you had on the screen, it said you were unable to form memories.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you unpack that a little bit? I mean, because I hear then amnesia and things like that, so unpack that a little bit.
So this, where is it? There it is. Okay, so this part is the part that affects your memories, which also interworks with your amygdala, hippocampus, and hypothalamus. Whenever you start to stress repeatedly, those nerve endings are not connected anymore, or it has a hard time connecting, so they can't communicate whether to bring back memories or not.
So, I mean, can you forget a day?
Yeah, that is entirely possible, although that's rare. I mean, there is more severe cases like Alzheimer's, amnesia. Those parts are damaged.
Okay. That was amazing. Thank you.
I got a couple, if anything, just highlights. I love the connection that you're making between some of this more usually thought of more psychologically and something more of a intangible mental type thing that's directly connected to something that's really purely physical. And the idea of a loop, like you find out a lot that one problem contributes to a bigger problem, and you have to at some point in time disrupt that loop, and that's the difficulty in it. So that makes so much sense. The question that I had, the more technical question I had, you mentioned, I think it was type 2 diabetes you mentioned is reversible but not curable. Can you explain that a little bit more?
So it's more, what I mean by that is it's more easily contained, and over time it can be as though you didn't have it. That's not the same thing as curing. Curing is like you don't have it anymore. There is a risk for it to come back.
Got it. Okay, so it's more like all these levels that you're talking about needing balance. Those are balanced. It's just you still have the likelihood that it could get. Got it.
With
Makes
type
sense.
1, there just is no way to reverse it or cure it.
Got it. That's super interesting. And I love the your biblical integration that, fear not. It's, I don't know, like, sorry to pull the Bible, it sounds super youth pastory, as Mr. Moore says, but it's like, it's one of those things that it's not so much that God promises us to alleviate any trouble that we have in life, but he is with us in the trouble. And so it's not so much give all these problems up, it's just don't fear in the problems. It just, I love that. Anyways, classmates, you got anything for Emma? Any questions or comments?
No.
I don't know who was first.
Do you do any research on like the opposite? Because like stress is like good in some places. If you're like in a dangerous situation, the amount of stress will like activate your adrenaline. Yeah, and is there like a thing where that doesn't happen, where like either there's like not enough stress or people aren't affected like as much?
I didn't really do a whole lot of research in that area. But I would suspect that could probably happen if you are constantly stressing, so your body just gets confused.
This is not entirely pertinent to the main subject of your project, but do you think like people with diabetes have like a harder time with like traumatic events because like that would cause like stress? So do you think that they have a harder time like overcoming those than people who don't?
Personally, yes, because with like traumatic experiences, you have that, and like PTSD, for example, you have that, and like multiple stressors a day, plus you're trying to take care of your diabetes. It just becomes a whole heat, like hot mess, just because you're trying so hard already just to control your blood sugars. So then you add more stress to it with traumatic events. It can really be harmful. Yes, ma'am.
Did you see any connection between diabetes and then issues of the pancreas, like pancreatic cancer?
I did not. That did not come up whenever I was researching.
I didn't come in here to think about that, but my dad had diabetes and then he died of pancreatic cancer. And so now I'm thinking, you know, like my sister and I constantly think about, okay, well, genetically, you know, what could we be affected by, and all of that. But I thought that was interesting. It kind of opened that up for me.
Diabetics are more susceptible to having pancreatic cancer. That's actually one of the complications that can come with not taking care of your diabetes. There's like a lot of complications, but that's one of the more out there ones that you're more susceptible to having pancreatic cancer because that organ's not doing anything, you want to say. It's just kind of dead floating in your body. So it's just dead there. So.
Interesting.
Anything else? I think you answered all of our questions. All right, great job. Thank you.